see. Uh-oh. Things have gotten out of alignment. Hello, and welcome everybody to Blind Eye Live. I am your host, the run all over the earth, Hunter King, Blind Eye himself, owner and proprietor of Blind Eye Media, a small fledgling, well, of course it's small, it's one man, a tiny fledgling internet media company. And we've got a shorter show today. I'm going to try and be brief. And obviously it's not at the normal time. Usually I've been starting it between 2 and 2:15. But things have been wild this week. And I got the pleasure today, actually. I'll start off with this. I got the pleasure today to be in a recording studio with the just super awesome, super talented worship pastor, worship minister of Calvary Baptist Church here in Beaumont, Texas, John Griffin, who is doing some vocal tracking for a project that we're working on that I got to do some of the main vocal track for. First time, ever doing something like that. Super exciting. And we were working with my friend and really talented composer, producer, Caden Welburn. Really cool dude. So that was really fun today. And also got to eat lunch with Caden and our other worship minister, Mr. Stephen Hayes, Brother Stephen Hayes. He's great. I get served with him at V2. I'm a drummer and a vocalist, and I serve at the church doing mostly percussion stuff, but things have been really cool, getting to do some recording and use my vocal talents a little more, and realizing I had a little more, I guess, gas in the tank for that than I ever thought that I did. So that's been really cool. But yeah, so on today's show, we're going to be jumping into NBA trade deadline stuff. I'm actually I have a bunch of stuff memorized, but my phone died while I was out doing stuff, and realized that, and I missed some things that came in right at the bell of free agency. So if this, sorry if this throws off the brightness a little bit for the stream. Can't necessarily, boom. Yeah. So it's going to light me up a little bit because because of my blindness, I have a nice large monitor here, and I had to sit pretty close to it to read. But I wanted to check. I don't know the details of a couple of these deals, but Victor Oladipo allegedly has joined the Miami Heat, but that was about when my phone died. Yep, that absolutely happened. Let's see, I'm just double checking over the top for okay, I'm going to snag the deals that I don't have. I'm going to go over the ones that I do first, have memorized, and my thoughts on those first and foremost, and then I'll get into some of these other deals. So I figure I'll start off with the first really big one, because obviously the Oladipo deal is probably the biggest trade of the day, but I would say that personally that there were more big deals other than just Depot. Sorry, I was getting distracted by doing this. So I will pull that back up once we get into it. So yeah. So for starters, the first deal I want to break down is, let's see. Wish I could check this a little better. Okay, I think that's good. Let me know if my camera seems a little crooked because I can't see straight. it's hard for me to get everything lined up perfectly. Um, so first deal that I wanted to talk about is we're going to start off with probably the second biggest transaction out of these, which the Orlando Magic just in general today finally going scorched earth on their movable assets, which is good. They needed to do this for themselves and for the players involved. So, well, I'll start with a minor trade. So their first move of the day was trading Evan Fournier to the Boston Celtics for 2 future second-round picks. I believe those picks were in 2023 and in 2027. But I might be wrong. Because there were several deals today that involved multiple second-round picks. But I will say that in some form or fashion, the Celtics are sending 2 second-round picks to the Magic for Evan Fournier. I think for the Magic, pretty good value for a guy who several years ago, his developmental path looked really awesome. I mean, when you're looking at a guy who can give you 15 to 17 points per game, he was grabbing like 5 boards a game. He was dishing like 3.5 assists a game, and giving you, somewhat passable defense, if not great defense, as someone who can play the 2 and the 3, and like defensively, and secondary ball handler. He's a guy that can fit alongside just about any type of primary playmaker. But he didn't really continue to advance as his career went on, or over the past few years. He hasn't moved any of his skills like further. Like his playmaking hasn't improved, because that was the big thing. People were like, okay, this guy's showing some playmaking. Like if this guy can add just a couple more tricks to his bag and get a little more efficient here, if this guy could be extremely valuable. This, like, a lot of people were saying, like, this guy might be able to become like a 25-5 kind of guy, or at the worst, like a 18-5 kind of guy, maybe 18-5 assists kind of guy. And that just hasn't really materialized. I mean, he's still really good. And for the Celtics, you move him from like where in Orlando he's obviously a starter. You put him on the Celtics where maybe he's the 5th starter. And he can kind of, depending on like matchups, they can either run, Kemba. Maybe they could split Kemba and Marcus Smart up more to have like a point guard on the court all the time. Well, and of course you got Peyton Pritchard too. He shoots the ball. He's above average 3-point shooter. So Fournier's a really solid get for the Celtics. Although I would say this is rip maybe entirely on Romeo Langford with the Celtics. Like in terms of, I think maybe they are I wouldn't be surprised if Romeo Langford ends up in a trade, say, this offseason. And I would say that for this season at least, Aaron Nesmith is probably getting mothballed a little bit, which stinks for him, and also for me as someone who really, believed in like Nesmith as a prospect, and in Nesmith and his ability to be like productive and useful this year. By the time the playoffs came around, I really thought his shooting hasn't translated yet. So Fournier to the Celtics, I think that was a really good deal for both teams. I think the Magic getting 2 second-round picks, there just wasn't a market for teams like wanting a guy who was on an expiring deal for like a first-round pick. Like them getting a first for him was was a stretch. It wasn't impossible to see that happening, but it was going to be like a very late first-round pick, and I'd probably rather have 2 future seconds than like a second-round pick that's going to be like 23 or later. I'd rather have 2 bites of the apple that are basically the same kind of shot. So, and Evan Fournier, if I'm not mistaken, is a former second-round pick. So, And he gets to go to a team that's contending. And obviously, like, the Celtics need a little more something, and their young wings just aren't giving it to them. So, and really, they didn't have, outside of Kimba and Jalen and Jason, like, Marcus Smart's a super streaky shooter. Peyton Pritchard, pretty good jump shot, or at least he did in college. I don't know his 3-point percentage right off the hand right now, but Peyton Pritchard, his shooting's for real. But Nesmith hasn't been for real so far this year. Langford, I want to say he shot like 21% from 3 in college, like his lone year at Indiana. They really needed another guy who was like a credible shooter on the roster. So Fournier gives you more than that. So he's definitely, he might even be a little overqualified for the role he's going to play for the Celtics. So that's a really good deal for them. The second trade the Magic made today was they traded Nikola Vucevic to Chicago. This is a pretty big deal, actually. So Nikola Vucevic, who's second-time All-Star this year, and very deservedly so, and one of the more underrated players in the league. He's not like an elite defensive center, but this guy is a top rebounder. This guy has gone from being one of the most fun post players to watch, who had a really nice mid-ranger, to he's a borderline deadly three-point shooter. Like, legit beast of it. Brook Lopez had that streak where he was shooting really well. Vooch also made that jump. He just never fell off. Vooch has been shooting well from 3 for several years now, and like on really good volume. And he's an elite post player. Really good playmaker. Great rebounder. He's not Jokic passing, but he's a really good passer. He's not far behind. I'd say he's really not that far behind Domantas Sabonis. And you put him on a team with more shooting and more creative, like, cutters and stuff. Actually, or you put him in Billy Donovan's offense. Actually, I think Vooch could really improve up his playmaking numbers. So Vucevic, Al-Farouq Aminu, his contract go to Chicago. And Chicago sends Wendell Carter Jr., 2018, number 7 overall pick. Wendell Carter Jr., who I still believe in Wendell Carter Jr. Otto Porter, and Otto Porter's expiring contract, and 2 future first-round picks, one in 2021, one in 2023. I'm sure there's protections on at least one of them, but I didn't see them. So, which Chicago's a decent team right now. Like, this team is, I don't see Chicago, or I didn't see Chicago's roster as it was, as a team that was going to be picking, like, if they picked in the top 10, it was going to be at the back end of the top 10, like 9th, 10th. I don't see them, I see them as, like, borderline top 20 roster in the, like, I see their roster and I'm like, this is at least the 20th best roster in the league. Although some of that's with seeing growth for different players. Like Kobe White, Wendell Carter Jr., Lauri Markkanen. So obviously they decided to go with Vooch, who is a center. He is a center. And saw Wendell Carter as a center, which he is. And they chose, and maybe it was because it was easier to move Carter, but they're stuck with Lauri Markkanen, they decided to stick by Lauri Markkanen, who is a power forward. And so the bill, really the Bills only, they're shipping one like young piece for a stud veteran. Yes, there's 2 first-round picks involved, and those are going to be 2 young players, but Chicago has a lot of young players. And really, they were kind of overcrowded with young players. When you look at, just the number of first-round picks they've had over the past, like, these are just the guys who are on rookie deals right now that they had on their roster coming into the trade deadline. You had Kobe White, who they drafted last year. You have Patrick Williams, who has been great this year. Awesome. I love his future. Like, his future outlook is extremely bright, like, huge, like, star, like, all-star level bright already, in my opinion. Like, I see the developmental curve. Was their first-round pick this year. You had Lauri Markkanen and Wendell Carter, although Markkanen, I think, is in the last year of his rookie deal. So he's headed to restricted free agency, I believe. You had Chandler Hutchinson, who's on a rookie deal, and I think I'm missing one other like guy. These are first round picks. Then you had like second round picks like Daniel Gafford. And I'm forgetting a couple more guys, but they have a lot of young developmental guys. And like I said, Williams is hitting off. Markkanen has shown enough where, like, I get it. It's like this guy has dynamic scoring potential as a big. He's had some injury issues, but I believe in Markkanen, and I believe in him with Billy Donovan. I believed in Wendell Carter with Billy Donovan. So, and I think, like, he's going to the Magic. I believe the Magic are still coached by Steve Clifford. Clifford's a great coach. So, and if anything, I actually think Carter is exactly the kind of big that Clifford wants. I think Clifford is actually the coach that'll get the most out of Wendell Carter. So I think this is a great move for Orlando. Getting Carter and 2 first-round picks for Vooch is a big get. I think it's a great deal. And they were able to get out of Al-Farouq Aminu's contract and get Otto Porter's expiring deal back. So they're going to be able to get some cap space out of this. Or I think they'll have some cap flexibility. I don't know what their cap numbers are now. Because, they have signed Jonathan Isaac and Markelle Fultz to extensions, but and they already got off of Fournier's number for this year and like his cap hold for next year by trading him. But back to the Bulls, I'll get to the Magic once I get done with talking about all these moves. I really like them getting Vooch. Like they wanted their goal with this deadline for Chicago was they would like to get some proven, like their moves right now is they have a lot of young talent. They wanted to get some veteran, like tentpole type players who can, like some people to continue to mentor and build up these young guys and improve the team's ability to compete. And Vucevic is going to do that. Vucevic is going to improve that team from where it is right now because he's going to improve their offense just by like his screening, and his just ability to play in the post, make out of the post. He can make plays off the short roll and the pick and roll. He can pop, and he can roll hard to the rim. He's not like an necessarily like some athletic above the rim like dominator like in the roll, but he's a big strong guy who, when he gets rolling, like you're not stopping him. And he's really deft at like, catching passes on the roll, making some kind of fake and pivoting into a better shot. Like, and Vucevic has the dirtiest, nastiest pivot game in the NBA as far as I'm concerned. That guy will put you in the spin cycle and he will wash you clean of all your sins. That was a little sacrilegious. I'm sorry. But I love watching Nikola Vucevic. And I'm excited to see him with Billy Donovan and what he's going to be able to do with Zach LaVine. Because one of the things that Orlando has been deprived of for years now is like quality guard play. Like, not like star guard play, even like average, like starting guard play. Like, you could argue the best point guard they've had in like since Jameer Nelson left was DJ Augustin. Ugh. I mean, if that guy's your sixth man, you were still wanting a better sixth man, let alone starting point guard. And that's no disrespect to DJ Augustine. Like, Mint is like, he's a good player, but he's not a starting point guard, or at least he's not a good one. It's like if he's your starting point guard, that's a problem because that's a deep position in the NBA. That's arguably the deepest position in the NBA. So, let me getting back to like the Bulls part of this equation. So, they consult and they made another trade too, and I'll get to that one. Although it's not quite as transformational a trade. Um, well, actually, I guess I could get to it. Well, I'll get to it once I get past the starting lineup. So, like, they've consolidated some of their young talent because I mentioned Chandler Hutchinson and Daniel Gafford. They actually got traded for two other guys on rookie contracts. It was basically like a young player swap. They flipped Hutchinson and Gafford to Washington for Troy Brown Jr., who I still believe it's year 3 for him. He's like a 6'7", 215, 220-pound, like playmaking shooting guard, small like playmaking wing with a inconsistent jump shot, but he plays hard. He shows great leadership. I think you get him out of Washington, you put him in Chicago, you put him on their bench unit. And you think about like a lot of the young guards the guards that the Bulls have right now. You have Levine, you have White. It's like you put Brown with like White on the second unit. And I think you have some Brown adds some playmaking. Not that White can't playmake, because I mean he had like a crazy like 11 or 12 assist game earlier this year. But you allow White to hunt his shot more, and White's actually a pretty canny cutter as a guard, and you allow Brown to develop his playmaking more than he can on Washington's team. So I really like it. And swapping Gafford for Wagner is an interesting one because it seems like the Bulls are just doubling down on like, we're just going to go super offense. Like, we're not going to play any defense, but we are going to shoot the lights out is what I'm seeing with this. Because Carter's, although his numbers have been up and down, like Carter is going to be a really good defensive big. He's going to be. He has those Al Horford. He has the outlines of Al Horford, except a little more athletic. And his 3-point game has started earlier. And Gafford is more of like your traditional. He's like your spread pick and roll dive threat who then protects the rim on the other end. So they flipped those two guys for Vucevic and Wagner. Wagner's like a 4-5 hybrid with some ball handling, who could shoot, but he's not very good defensively. So this is going to be really interesting with the way their roster is constructed. Because Chicago has more moves in it this offseason for sure. And I have a feeling they're probably going to target another young big in the draft. Like a two-way type. Or at least I feel that way. And that type of guy is really fungible on the market. Like, they're free agent guys who can do those kinds of things. So I don't know. We'll see what they do there. But Chicago's obviously putting a premium on offensive versatility and ability right now. And we still really don't know what Chandler Hutchinson is at this point. Like, he was an interesting, like, I think he was a junior at Boise State when he got drafted. I think it was 2019. Might have been 2018, but I think it was 2019. He got drafted like 23 overall, I think. And he hadn't really made a big blip on the radar yet. The idea was he would had like some scoring instincts, had even if his like I don't know how great I can't remember if he was like a great shooter in college because I don't think he was like a great shooter, but I remember people really liking his jumper form. Like people see him as like uh the idea was he would develop into like a fourth, fifth starter. Like he would be your second best wing in a starting duo was like his ceiling or like what people were projecting him down the road to become. Or at least a really good wing. Like he could be a starter on a good team. So I mean, kudos to Washington, I guess, for getting rid of a guy that I guess they had decided they were bored with or they didn't see like Troy Brown wasn't developing the way they wanted or whatever. Or maybe they really liked Gafford and they wanted to get rid of Wagner. Um, it was an interesting. I mean, it's kind of like a push trade. Like we'll see like how things turn out. I think Billy Donovan's a better coach than Scott Brooks. So Scott Brooks has helped develop some great talents over the years, but I think some of that maybe was on the talents more. Whereas I've seen Billy Donovan do it at the college level, and we saw like what Oklahoma City did last year. And while it seems like Oklahoma City's like player development is also tied behind like it's not just tied to whoever the main coach is. Um do 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 I think that the Warriors should have acquired Buddy Hield? I didn't see that rumor. Of course, I'm not all seeing as blind eye here. Thanks for the question, man. I appreciate you. I mean, I think most teams in the league should try to acquire a guy who can shoot the lights out and put the ball in the basket like Hield. I was a believer of Buddy when he was coming out. Um, Although I even thought he was maybe a little overdrafted when he came out. But the shooting stroke is real. His scoring ability is real. But maybe I'm kind of bullish on some of the guys they have. It depends on what what the offer was for like that maybe they were working on for Healed if that was a thing. Because if all they had to do was flip like Oubre and a first, or like Oubre and I'm trying to think of like how the contracts would line up. But I'm thinking that would have been like Oubre and maybe Lee, what is it, Marcus Lee or Damian Lee, and maybe another bench guy if they needed another salary, and like a first. I might do that because I think Wiggins has been really great for them, and I think I personally I think the Warriors should keep going with like Wiggins, like with the group that they're at. He's a little overpriced for what he's doing, but he's doing a really good job of being like a tertiary option. And he gives you, and it seems like he's putting out way more effort on defense, and like Wiggins has played way better this year, and it seems like the team really likes him, the players there really like him, and if Curry and Green like Wiggins and are cool with what Wiggins is doing, because Dre's gonna let fly if he doesn't like what you're doing. I think they should keep Wiggins. I don't know if I would have traded Wiggins for Hield, but I mean, I think just about anyone should have tried to acquire Buddy Hield, to be honest, if the price was right. It just depends on like, can you get the contracts to work? Because well, it's yeah, I mean, if it's a logical and if it's a sensible trade, yeah, I would have tried to acquire him. I would have been really cool if my Grizzlies had acquired him, because as a Grizz fan, um, but it depends on who we were having to give up. Because like I wouldn't give up, I wouldn't want certain guys to be in that trade. Like if we could send like Dylan Brooks, let's see, I think Wiggins. Do I think Wiggins and a few picks from Middleton? I don't know if Milwaukee would move off of Middleton actually. Middleton's really good. And there's some people who have poo-pooed about his real value and that his defensive metrics are a little overrated or whatever. That's that's probably true. Um, a little bit of that based on the eye test, like because all these advanced metrics they're not they're not set in stone like this is the actual hierarchy of the league because this stat says so. Each stat has strengths and weaknesses. A lot of our defensive metrics have some flaws to them. It's just like defensive real plus minus is like heavily weighted. Rebounds are heavily weighted in the thing. So defensive real plus minus is heavily weighted towards bigs, which should make it alarming to everyone that Russell Westbrook has for so long been so like bad in defensive real plus minus. And this is where it's applicable. We know how it's balanced. So Westbrook out rebounding everyone in his position. Sorry, I'm getting a little off track here, but I wanted to explain this. Westbrook being such an elite rebounder at his position and one of the better rebounders around the league in terms of rebounding numbers, and he's still like lower than like Damian Lillard, Kyrie Irving, Steph Curry, and other bad defenders, or in the same realm as like bad defenders, or seemingly bad defenders should tell you actually he's really bad at defense. Because he's got something puffing him up in that statistic, and he's right here or below worse players. But anyway, if I could get Middleton for Wiggins and a few picks, heck yeah, I'm doing that deal. It depends on how many picks, but because I think Middleton's great. He's a much more dynamic offensive player than Wiggins. He's not the athlete, but he's a far better shooter. He can shoot off the dribble, off the catch. He's got a amazing mid-range and post-game. He's a far more advanced playmaker, and he's a solid team defender. So yeah, I would do that if I could. I just don't think you can. Let's see. Clay and Kelly Oubre and a few first-rounders for Paul George, maybe? Man, now you're getting fun. Have you been watching Sporting Logically? Because Spolo, which he's a great NBA channel for you to check out. Spolo did a video talking about how like the Clippers, I think it was him, talking about how the Clippers should absolutely regret like trading SGA for Paul George, SGA and all those picks for Paul George, and I kind of in a way agree with him. If I could get Paul George for that, I probably would, because as much as I love Clay, I don't want this to be the case, but Clay's probably not coming back near the player he was. It was one thing when it was one injury, when it was just the Achilles, and now it's the ACL, or vice versa. I just don't see how he comes back the same guy. Like, the jump shot probably is there, but it might not either, because you got to remember, not that he's got, like, he jumps a ton on his shot necessarily, but your shooting stroke, everything matters in terms of power. Because if you have more of a set shot where you're not jumping as much, you're putting more arm strength into your shot. Guys who jump higher to propel their shot using more leg drive. So, any change in athleticism and athletic ability, which, and with his legs, can affect his jump shot, just like it'll affect his defense. Like, he's not going to be the same defender. So, but I have no idea how that could, or I don't I don't see the Clippers like trading Paul George, which I think he and Kawhi, don't they have opt outs for this summer? in their contracts. It's this summer, right? So I mean, if Paul George would stay, I'd definitely consider making the deal. And yeah, LaMelo is. I would say LaMelo's probably done for the entire year. Because from what I understand, so I watch a. I love how I'm a YouTuber who keeps shouting out all these other YouTubers, but Dr. Brian, is it Brian Sutter? Um, Brian Sutterer, MD, or something like that. You'll probably find him if you type in something close to it. His first name is Brian. He's Brian something MD. He did a video specifically about the fracture. So it's a wrist fracture on the inside of his wrist, and it apparently also has affected the. It's not. It's like affecting his thumb as well on that hand, and it's something that's going to keep him out a while. And they might as well probably just shut him down for the season. If he's totally healthy towards the end of the year, maybe you bring him back. But I think you protect him, and just whatever. It just depends. Although it is a hand injury, and I don't think it's his shooting hand. I'm trying to remember which, because he fell back on it. Did you see Clay about? Yeah, I did. See that. I mean, I'm not worried. I think his shooting stroke will be fine if that's why you're referencing that. I just it's the rest of his game that I'm more worried about. And I tend to set lower expectations so that I'm more, I'd rather be pleasantly surprised than completely disappointed. Like, I guess for sometimes I'm with how many injuries Clay has had, it's just like we need to be really careful about our expectations for him coming back. Because like I was devastated. He's one of my favorite players. So, I mean, guys who can go off for 60 and dribble like 11 times in the game is retarded. I'm not kidding you. In that 60-point game, tracking data, I think it was like he dribbled like 11 times the entire game. He dribbled the ball 11 times and scored 60 points. It's really dumb. But yeah, if you keep having questions or whatever, like keep sending them in. I was covering like some of the trades, like I was covering the Orlando Chicago trade involving Nikola Vucevic. But let's see. That's funny. My chats are actually popping up quicker on my streams. They're popping up over here where I can read them. Hey, I appreciate you coming in, man. And it's like if you want to, it's like you'll probably catch some of this stuff on anywhere else. But if you want my opinions on these other trades, just come back to the video once it's archived. It automatically archives. And I really appreciate you supporting the channel, coming and popping in chat. So thanks, man. Appreciate you, William. So yeah, so I guess my last thought on like Chicago, I think it's very interesting, but man, it is all offense, no defense. We are going to have the strongest right hook in the game, but our jaw is going to be made out of the cheapest and flimsiest glass. But it's going to be fun to watch. I would imagine. Like, that team's going to be really fun because the other team's going to have a great offensive night against them. But yeah, let's see. And Orlando, so they get Orlando getting Wendell Carter. I think that's great. The 2 firsts is a big deal. I don't know what the protections are on them at this time because I didn't see the protections on them, and I might pop up that trade here in a second, find it and see if there's been any protections reported. But I did really like. I like the value there in getting Porter's expiring. So, which that coupled with the Fournier trade, um, it's like obviously, you know, let's tear some of this stuff down that we have that hasn't taken us anywhere, and let's get some more assets and hope we do a better job of finding and cultivating, like finding better assets and cultivating them into better things than we have at this point. Which that brings us to the third, and for most people, probably the most interesting, the biggest trade, which is Aaron Gordon finally got out of Orlando. So we have in that trade, we have Aaron Gordon and Gary Clark going to Denver. If I remember correctly, Gary Clark is like a wing. I can't remember if he was undrafted or a late second round pick. Don't know a lot about him, to be honest. But you have Gordon and Clark going to Denver, and Orlando is getting Gary Harris, R.J. Hampton, and a protected 2025 first-round pick. And I believe that's everything. Which, for some people are like, man, only one first. It's like, they got Gary Harris and R.J. Hampton and a first for Aaron Gordon. I think that's great value because Hampton has crazy offensive upside. He's like 6'5" with, I want to say he's got like a 6'8", 6'9" wingspan. He's a great ball. He's a really good ball handler. He's one of the fastest players in the league. He's extremely fast. And he's a creative player. And I think as we've seen with Denver, like you look at how Michael Porter's offensive game is evolving. I think R.J. Hampton could evolve really well there too. And Michael Malone is an awesome coach. And some people poo-poo him for like not playing Michael Porter Jr. enough or this and this. It's like he is developing a player and he's trying to develop certain habits. And if Michael Porter Jr. wants to be the best he can be, he needs to listen to Michael Malone. Michael Malone got DeMarcus Cousins. DeMarcus Cousins respect. DeMarcus Cousins. Now, this is not a slight at DeMarcus Cousins. DeMarcus Cousins has been a little bit of a temperamental guy. He's super competitive, and the Kings organization has been a joke for forever. Like, ever since they blew up the team that was so dominant in the early 2000s with Bibby and Doug Christie and Peja Stojakovic, Chris Webber, Vlade Divac, Bobby Jackson, like that group. That was a great team. Ever since then, they've had like a few good players, but they waste it. Doesn't matter who, comes in. Doesn't matter. New owner comes in. Man, this is going to change everything. No, Vivek's crazy. Although he's finally turning things over to seemingly some intelligent basketball people. Monty McNair seems to be a pretty intelligent guy. Hopefully he's smart enough to get rid of Luke Walton. You want to talk about a guy who pulled the wool over all of our eyes. But anyway, back to Michael Malone. Michael Malone is a great coach, and he will help develop players to be their best. R.J. Hampton is going, I think, or I say R.J. Hampton. R.J. Hampton is going to, I messed up. He's going to Orlando. So I thought, with the way Michael Porter Jr.'s game was going, yeah, I totally messed that up. I went on a rant for some stupid. Nah. But anyway, so let me straighten myself back out. So R.J. Hampton, Gary Harris, a 2025 protected pick going to Orlando. So Orlando's going back into a more rebuild-focused mode. R.J. Hampton's going to get more minutes than he was getting in Denver. Because that's what I was going to get into, and I'm like, wait a second. R.J. Hampton's leaving Denver, where he wasn't getting any minutes. He's going to Orlando. Steve Clifford's a really good coach. I don't know if he's as good as Michael Malone, but he's a great coach. Um, I would take him personally. I would take Steve Clifford over Tyronn Lue and Doc Rivers. Some people are like, you're crazy. I'm like, in terms of like schemes and things, I actually think that Clifford is an extremely intelligent coach. Look at how Charlotte was always in the back end of the playoffs just about it when Steve Clifford was there. If players stayed healthy, and that was with poor basketball management at the top there, making bad decisions. Like Steve Clifford was cobbling together top 10 defenses with Kemba Walker at point guard. Not that Kemba Walker's like, a bad player, because I love Kemba Walker. But he tries, but he's not a good defender because he's kind of small. He's limited. But he was putting together top 10, top 5 defenses and decent enough offenses to get them into the playoffs. Despite Michael Jordan and his bad, when he would get down in the front office stuff, like making bad decisions. Although one of the decisions everyone's like, man, this is a Michael Jordan bad decision. Man, them letting Kemba walk and then getting Terry Rozier in that sign trade, and everyone's laughing about the deal that he signed, including me to a degree. I thought it was an overpay. Rozier's worth that money right now. Rozier's been great. One of the best shooters in the league. Plays his butt off. I mean, if he was in Boston right now instead of Kemba, there's an argument that they're maybe a better team. That maybe they shouldn't have cut bait on Scary Terry. But we'll talk about that later. So, getting back to Orlando, Steve Clifford's a really good coach, and can really improve like players' fundamentals. He can get it. I think he can make average defenders out of subpar defenders. And R.J. Hampton has tools to be a factor defensively. So you get R.J. Hampton on the team, and that team needs ball handlers. And I'll say this. I am all here for some Cole Anthony, R.J. Hampton backcourt minutes. You want to talk about two guys that who will either go 0 for 30 combined or 22 for 30 and light the world on fire? Those two guys, man. I'm all for that. Please give me as many Cole Anthony, R.J. Hampton backcourt minutes as possible. And then you get Gary Harris. Gary Harris is an upgrade on that team from Evan Fournier in terms of defense. Not offense, not creation, but from defense. And maybe Steve Clifford and a change of scenery can get Harris out of some of his offensive funk, because there's a period of time, 3 years ago, it looked like Harris was going to be a top shelf defender who could defend positions 1 through 3. He was going to sink, and it looked like he was on track to sink 40% of his threes. At the very least, 38.5% of his threes. He's a canny cutter, and it looked like, okay, this guy's showing this guy can be a secondary ball handler. When he was at Michigan State, this guy looked like he had the potential to be potentially down the road a primary perimeter scorer for a team. Or at least he'd be an amazing he'd be the ideal second banana 6-7 years into his career, or even sooner, to a top shelf stud offensive scorer. So maybe Orlando and Steve Clifford can get something more out of him than what Denver was getting. Who knows? Sometimes changes of scenery do that for people, and sometimes it accelerates their decline into obscurity. And sometimes they just continue to be the same player. So we'll see. I would say more often than not, it actually turns out that they just stay the same player. But maybe there's a slight improvement. Maybe he doesn't get to where we think he was going to get, or maybe he doesn't get to like maybe the best he was previously, but maybe he can get somewhere halfway between where he is now and where he was at his best. And if he gets there, that's probably, I mean, that's a good thing. So yeah, I think getting I think getting Hampton was a big deal for them. And so I'm gonna stop talking about Orlando for a bit. I'll get back to like talking about what they got out of this deal because I'm gonna talk about everything they got here in a second. Getting back to Denver, Denver getting Aaron Gordon was, I think, is exactly what they needed because so Denver made a trade earlier today. Like it was the first trade today, I think, or at least it was the first one I saw. And it was Denver acquired JaVale McGee for Isaiah Hartenstein and 2 second-round picks, which I was like, that's kind of steep. Because Hartenstein has shown some like kind of cool stuff, like as a stretchy kind of big guy who can shoot, rebound. Like I thought Hartenstein had like he's got potential. And then you got 2 second-round picks, although they're protected and they're all like, it's like protected until like pick 46. So both of these second-round picks, if Cleveland gets them, they're going to be back half of the second round. So not necessarily like super valuable or in the most valuable range, but at the same time, I'm like, 2 second-round picks and a young, fairly promising player for McGee. Okay. But at this point, I'm like, your team needs forwards. And McGee's not a power forward, let alone a small forward, which they really need. Neither is, I mean, Hartenstein's a power forward, but he's not like a combo forward. You know, he's a power forward center type. So, you give me this trade, and I'm like, and I when I tweeted on Twitter, or like I did a quote tweet of the deal on Twitter, I'm like, Denver's got to have like, there's got to be something else going on here, or this trade doesn't make sense. Maybe I saw it yesterday. It might have been yesterday that this trade happened, but anyway, I was like, this trade doesn't make sense without some other move to me. And oh boy, did Denver have a move in it. Because you go and you get Gordon and Clark, because I'm pretty sure Clark's a small forward. So now you're looking at a starting five for Denver where you've got Jamal Murray, you've got Will Barton, who gets to be a starter, which he really wanted, and at this point, that's probably who he is. He should be like the fifth, or depending on if the top 3 guys are really, really good, the 4th best starter on a contending team. And Barton's getting to play his really ideal position, which is more of a 2 guard. I mean, I know, like, especially like offensively, like, positions don't matter, but like defensively, you really don't want this guy guarding like big wings. You don't. Now you've got Aaron Gordon, or then you've got like Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr. at your forward spots, which is perfect because these guys are long, athletic. Gordon, of course, is thicker than Porter, so Porter can't defend like LeBron and Kawhi, Paul George, KD, da-da-da. But Aaron Gordon can. So you've got those guys at the forward spots now. and Aaron Gordon gets to cut off of the best playmaking big man of all time in Nikola Jokic. And he's canning corner threes this year, actually. Or like spot up threes. Aaron Gordon's actually shooting really well on catch and shoots. But he's not going to be like a pick and roll ball handler. And what's going to happen here is he's finally in a position where he's like, I'm on a really good team. You know what? It's like, I can win now. I'm not the. He was the best player on Orlando. He was or should I say, he was the most talented player on Orlando, perimeter wise. So I mean, why not let me try and grow? Why not let me try and become like this, discount store LeBron? Discount store might be not as cool. Like, how about we go with like, what if I become like Walmart Supercenter LeBron? Or at least see if I can. Because that's a really good player. Now what he can do is he can settle in on being like a role player and maybe being more like, not exactly like Draymond Green, but like a more athletic kind of Draymond Green type player who focuses on defense, who focuses on playing off of the people around him, which Aaron Gordon has a really, really good basketball IQ. You let Gordon play make in mismatch situations, like what Draymond does or has done with the Warriors off of Steph and Clay for so many years. Aaron Gordon can be really good, and you get him to where he's putting more of his focus on the defensive end. This dude has superhuman athleticism. This guy can come in from the weak side and make plays that only people like LeBron can. This is a guy who's going to be able to help mitigate Jokic's weaknesses. Like, Jeremy Grant was a really important player for this team last year. Aaron Gordon is better than Jeremy Grant. So, I think this is a no-brainer trade for Denver. I think this is a really good move. And getting Gary Clark helps their depth. I mean, he's not like a special player, but from what I see, like he's a decent depth guy. And they needed more like wing type depth. So, and it's like, yeah, they lose Harris and they lose Hampton, but I think this is a good trade because Harris has just stopped trending upward and had kind of trended downward, and like his upward trend really hadn't even gotten him back to like where he was. So I think it just was time for those parties to part ways, and really like it really seemed like the Nuggets drafted R.J. Hampton. It almost because like, well, this is a guy that we can flip later. Because when you look at their roster, they've got Jamal Murray. They had Harrison Barton. They have Monty Morris, their backup point guard, who's really good. You had P.J. Dozier, who they've been playing a lot. They love him. They brought in Campazzo. Like, Hampton wasn't playing. And he didn't really have path to playing time like in the future unless he just like supernovaed. But he was never going to supernova because he was never going to get a shot. So, and now he gets to go to a place in Orlando where he's going to get to play a ton. This is a big win for him. So I really like this move for Denver. I think this makes Denver a way more threatening team come postseason. And I'm excited for it. And I mean, they're going to have they can do some freaky stuff with their lineups with Gordon there. I mean, they could already do some freaking stuff like having like Bol there too, which he hadn't played enough either as far as I'm concerned. So now we're gonna get to the Magic. I want to break down the Magic because so let's put instead of talking about each of these deals individually, I want to talk about all the Magic's moves combined. So they turned Evan Fournier, Nikola Vucevic, Al-Farouq Aminu, Aaron Gordon, and Gary Clark into R.J. Hampton, Gary Harris, Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter's expiring contract. And Otto Porter's a decent player, but like he's a big expiring. 3 first-round picks over the next 5 drafts, 2021, 2023, 2025, and 2 second-round picks. That's pretty freaking good. I mean, I think that's pretty good value for 3 players on a team that has barely been a playoff team. And so you have pieces like Wendell Carter and R.J. Hampton who fit the timeline a little better of like Jonathan Isaac and Markelle Fultz and Cole Anthony and some of their other young pieces. And the guys they're going to draft here in a bit, the next few years. Although timelines are a little overrated because it's like, this 27, 28-year-old guy just doesn't match up with the timeline of these 20 and 21-year-olds. I'm like, having a guy in his prime years isn't good for a bunch of guys who have, and having, or who are really good before they hit their primes. Like, I don't know. Like, these other guys are going to start hitting their prime when this, 27, 28-year-old are in the back end of their prime. So I don't know. It's just so timeline's not always the best way, but I mean, you're putting these guys on like the same timetable, same or in the same kind of development band, if you will. But I mean, the Magic definitely get younger here. They're getting worse here in the short term. But Hampton has tons of upside. Carter has had flashes, and like he has a very balanced, well-rounded offensive game. And there's a lot of his game where it's like, this guy could be a lot like Vooch offensively. And down the road, this guy could turn into someone almost as, as explosive or as productive offensively, potentially. This guy has a lot of skill. But he has so much more defensive upside. And that's really what we're asking for from centers in today's game. Like our big guys. That's what we're asking for. And he can do things defensively that Vooch simply can't. So, obviously it hurts short term, but like down the road, I think this is a good move. And probably signals that they have given up on Mo Bamba. And I was worried about Mo Bamba, like during the draft process. And he just it seems like he has almost everyone's worst fears about Mo Bamba have turned out to be true. Sorry, I'm looking for where I put my Gatorade. I guess I finished that one. All right, new Gatorade. Arctic Cherry is not my favorite, but it's not bad. So yeah, I like R.J. Hampton. Like I said, his upside. Wendell Carter Jr.'s. I mean, I don't know how many years are left on Gary Harris's contract. You could probably flip him for someone in the offseason if you wanted, or for something of value potentially. I I mean, really good wing defenders have value, and ones that have any kind of shooting upside, there are people around the league who are willing to typically are willing to overpay for that. So not a bad asset, because Denver has historically not wanted to move off of Gary Harris. So that was another kind of big thing. Like, oh my God, Gary Harris actually moved. And I talked about Porter's like expiring, and then getting 3 firsts and 2 seconds. And yes, those 2 seconds are for Boston, but one of those I don't think was Boston's. So that's nice. But you're getting 5 picks on top of 2 really like 2 guys with really good upside. One guy who I think has sky high offensive upside. Like RJ Hampton has like a lot of Zach LaVine to him. He might not be as vertically explosive, but like he can get up there. He's lightning fast. And he has a lot of the skills and same build. So, except I don't know if he might be a little thicker than LaVine, and I think he's a little bit longer than LaVine. So I like that for Orlando, and Orlando just needed to make a decision. They needed to move. They needed to move Vooch. Vooch deserved to be moved. Now, obviously, he's not necessarily a contender, but he makes Chicago better. And when you're looking at just drafted a guy in Patrick Williams who already has turned in or moved into your starting lineup and is a solid starter. Really good. I mean, he's good defensively already. He has a silky mid-range game. Like Chicago's broadcasters have kind of jumped the gun in calling him. What do they call him? They call him the Paw. And for those who aren't aware, there's this guy with the nickname the Claw, named Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi's pretty good at the whole basketball thing. But Patrick Williams is kind of on a similar development track to him, and he's a little more advanced at a similar age. Because Kawhi wasn't like a one and done. He played multiple years at San Diego State. And he was really good. And I really liked his prospects coming out of college. And if he fixed his jump shot, he had a lot of potential. But I don't think anyone saw like his offensive development, even beyond the jump shot, because the jump shot was revelatory. But his mid-range game became so good. Like, I mean, he has that Michael Jordan level mid-range game. Like, he has a strong physical mid-range game, because Kobe's was a little more finesse, which Michael's had a lot of finesse, but he had power to his game. Kawhi he's not as vertically explosive as like Michael, but he's got this. He's a stronger built. Like he's a more rock hard built player. But he's just got this smooth game in the pick and roll, picking his spots at mid range. That Patrick Williams is showing that he might have that same like ability. Like his mid range pull ups are good. He's got a turnaround. And his catch and shoot numbers are good. Like I like his jump shot. I think he's going to be moving forward he's going to be a plus, maybe even a plus 3-point shooter. So when I say plus, like that's above average. Plus basically means really good. Not elite. Like plus would be like elite. If I'm using that kind of terminology, I guess I'll lay that out. I like to use plus. Like he's a plus player. That means above average. Double plus means he's well above average. Let's just put it that way. So Williams is going to be a plus to plus plus, like 3-point shooter moving forward. With his body and build, I just think you add, it's like, and with his defensive upside, that's going to help balance out some of this roster. Although it's leaning super offensive. But I think Vooch and Vooch raises their ceiling. And Aminu brings a veteran presence on the bench. Like, he can tweener forward. I don't know if he's gotten healthy because he got hurt, I think, last year. Missed a lot of time. I'm trying to remember. Because I know he was hurt. And I couldn't remember how long he was going to be out for. But obviously for Chicago, like, getting Vooch was basically all that mattered. Like, Aminu was just part of the trade to make it work. But man, Kobe White, Zach LaVine, Patrick Williams, Lauri Markkanen, Nikola Vucevic, those are the 5 best players on the team. That's a lot of offense. Oh, and Thad Young. Can't leave out Thad lighting the world on fire Young this year. Like, Thad's been crazy good this year. Like, everyone, like, coming in this year was like, man, after last year, man, Thad, maybe it's time for Thad to hang it up. Nope. Thad is back, baby. Wouldn't be surprised. I guarantee you we see Thad Young on Zach Lowe's Luke Walton All-Stars column this year. Follow Zach Lowe on, you have to have an ESPN Insider account to read his articles. Or it used to be called ESPN Insider. It's now ESPN Plus. I have one because I read a lot of stuff. And especially like NFL draft stuff with like Kuiper, McShay, whatever. But Zach Lowe he's the best NBA writer in my opinion. And his 10 things I like and don't like, that he puts out every Friday is awesome. And his other stuff, like this guy, and he also writes some features and stuff too, and they're just great. He's one of the best writers, long form writers. He's a joy to read. And his podcast, the Low Post Podcast, is really fun listen. I would recommend it. It's just, if they get off on like social stuff or whatever, or politics or whatever, just skip it and like find where they're done. And the basketball talk is great, and he's a really good analyst. He has some fun. Like, he'll say some, kind of silly things. But, like, he knows they're silly. He's just being a goof. But he does his column every year, the Luke Walton All-Stars, which are like just these guys who are role players, but they're just being elite in their roles, or they're guys that we don't look at necessarily as superstars, but like, they're amazing, at like what they're doing. Like, they're just having great years. So, anyway, Chicago. So then, next trade. I need to blow through some trades. So I mentioned that Denver had acquired, and sorry for the brightness shifting. My TV is like right here. So I mentioned JaVale McGee to Denver for Hartenstein, 2 seconds. So Rajon Rondo got traded to the Clippers by Atlanta for Lou Williams. And there were 2 second-round picks involved. And you would think that Atlanta was sending 2 second-round picks to the Clippers getting Lou Williams. No. The Clippers sent 2 second-round picks and Lou Williams to get Rondo. Which was weird to me. Like, did Lou just fall off a cliff this year? Because to me, I'm like, when I saw this, I'm like, okay, so they just straight up swapped these guys. That would have made some sense. Maybe a second rounder going to the Clippers because Lou Williams is a more dynamic offensive player. But no, they really just really wanted Rajon Rondo, and I couldn't believe it. Um, then we had a trade that I found a bit head scratching. So Toronto traded Norm Powell to the Trailblazers. I'm like, okay, Trailblazers trying to add some firepower. The Trailblazers sent Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood back or to Toronto for Norm Powell. Gary Trent Jr. has been really good this year. He was amazing in the bubble. He's younger than Powell. I don't know how many years, if he still has another year on his rookie deal left or not, but it's I was really shocked because and Powell's been spectacular this year and been really good for several years, and he's right now over guys who have shot over 200 threes this year. He is third in 3-point percentage behind only Joe Ingles and Joe Harris. So Joe White boys are the only two guys ahead of Norm Powell. Yes, I have a nickname for Ingles and Harris, and I call them Joe White boys because they're two of my favorite players, and I came up with a stupid nickname because I had them on a NBA 2K thing that I was doing with some friends. Don't judge me. But Powell's great. But I don't see him being a significant enough upgrade right now over Trent, and definitely not long term, because I think Trent has more upside than Powell, which Powell's like, I think he's like 26 or 27 now. Like, he's a really good player, got years of really good play left. But I think Trent has more, he's a little bit bigger, and I think a little bit longer. Maybe not quite as thickly built, but like he's a well-built wing. And he's been playing really good and shooting the lights out. I just think that Trent Jr. is as valuable as Powell, if not a little bit more, maybe. So you're sending him and Hood for Powell. And I'm like, to me it felt like, well, I guess the Blazers create a roster spot there. And Hood's actually been pretty good, considering he's been coming back from an Achilles. But I can understand being like, his contract's a little expensive. Maybe we shouldn't have signed him to that much of a deal. And, or this offseason. And so you're sending both these guys. I'm like, well, there's got to be another move. And maybe I missed it, but I haven't seen another move. So I like the move for the Raptors because I love Gary Trent Jr. And I liked him when he got drafted. I couldn't believe he fell to I think it was like the 51st pick in that draft. Somewhere between 45 and 51. And I know he didn't light the world on fire at Duke, but I just believed in his talent. And if someone put the time in development, which the Trailblazers have, he's really good. So this kind of shocked me. He was not the guy that I thought. I thought Simons would be the guy that got moved. And I love Anthony Simons upside still, because he's so young. But I think the Blazers, unless they get someone really good on the buyout market, or I find that there was another trade that was made that kind of makes sense. Like, I kind of think Toronto just, beat them on that deal. Let's see. That's that deal. I was right. The Nuggets deal was the 27, 20, and 23 second round picks. You had a deal yesterday where DeLon Wright got traded to the Pistons got traded to the Kings for Corey Joseph and the Kings 2021 and 2024 second round picks. Which I was like, I'd probably say Wright's better than Joseph too, but 2 second round picks worthy? I don't know. And one of those, the 2021, is actually a Los Angeles Lakers pick. So I guess that's not going to be a great second round pick, but still. everybody's already talked to death like a little while back where there was the PJ Tucker trade, so I'm not going to go into that one. Okay, so this is going back way further. All right. Wait, whoa. Did I see something I don't remember? Oh, I missed this trade. So the Heat traded Trevor Ariza to the Thunder for Myers Leonard and a second-round pick. Huh. When did that happen? That's an interesting one, actually. So, anyway, getting back into the trades from today. So I've covered most of them. So now we're going to finish with the big finale. Victor Oladipo. I wish I had gotten this a little earlier because I'm about to have to cut. I got time. I got plenty of time. So, Miami gets Victor Oladipo. The Rockets get Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk, and a right to swap first-round picks in 2022. That's it. That's all it took to get Victor Oladipo. Which Houston needed to get something for Oladipo because he wasn't going back there in free agency. So getting the ability to swap with Houston, to swap with the Heat next year doesn't really make any sense because I don't see how Houston's going to be better in 2020 or like next season to where that's going to matter. Avery Bradley really only makes sense on a contending team. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see the Rockets buy Avery Bradley out. And then Kelly Olynyk, who I think is an expiring contract right now, or this offseason. I could be wrong. He might have 2 years left, but I think his contract expires this offseason. So, and I think Bradley has signed either a 1-year deal or a 1 year deal with a team option on the second year. Something like that. So the Rockets got nothing for Oladipo except, I guess, cap space. Which, with Wall's contract on the books and Eric Gordon's contract on the books, I don't know if they have any cap space anyway. So they're tanking, and they don't have any of their own picks. Be patient, Houston fans, because this is what James Harden did to you. Not Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey didn't do this to you. James Harden did. And you should probably forgive him eventually, but don't yet. He deserves to hear about it. As for the Heat, Olynyk has been a nice player for them. And not having Olynyk or Myers Leonard kind of hurts to some degree, at the big spot. And they also, I want to say they made another trade that involved Chris Silva going somewhere. I want to refresh this page, see if they've added anything. Yes. They've added another one. Oh, because I missed there's a couple deals on here that I missed. Or maybe it's actually just one. Oh, no. They've just reordered some of these. But yeah. Well, I'm gonna scroll through here real quick and see if I can find it because I want to say it was like, oh, here it is. Here it is. This wasn't on here a second ago. So the Heat, and this fixes the loss of Leonard and Olynyk. The Kings traded Nemanja Bjelica to the Heat for Mo Harkless and Chris Silva. So with adding Ariza and Oladipo, you kind of mitigated some of the need for Mo Harkless, and Silva just really wasn't getting playing time, especially with as good as Precious Achiuwa has been so far this year. So Achiuwa, solid move or a solid pick. I love the pick because you don't want to use like when a new young player or like a stud player like develops. You don't want to just. I hate like jumping on this guy's can be the next one. But there was a lot that said that Precious Achiuwa could be like Bam Adebayo. He doesn't have the playmaking, but there are other skills that he provides, and which and could develop over time. Like, and some guys develop skills that you just don't see them ever developing, or wouldn't even think they would. So I think this is a good trade for the Heat, trading Harkless and Silva for Bjelica. He's a really good shooter. He can play the 4, the 5. He can play the 3 a little bit, but you really don't want. I'd say you really don't want that. And he's a solid rebounder, so I really like that move for them. Okay, yeah. So this added that trade. Then, so you get Bjelica, you get Ariza, you get Oladipo, and you didn't give up any like real long-term assets to do it. Because like they're going to re-sign Oladipo, I would imagine, or at least Oladipo would be willing to re-sign there, and probably is if they did this deal. I think this could be really good, especially if Oladipo continues to recover from his injury. So, a couple other smaller deals. So, the Mavs acquired J.J. Redick and Nicolo Melli from the Pelicans, who get James Johnson, Wes Iwundu, and a 2021 second-round pick. Wes Iwundu keeps getting moved. Maybe he'll get a chance to play with the Pellies, but I doubt it. Poor Wes Iwundu. I believed in you. I still believe in you. I have this just fascination with like long playmaking wings who show like some like or who have like slashing scoring abilities and show like glimpses of the ability to hit a jump shot. I don't know. I can't quit them. Yes. I think I need to wrap this thing up because I got somewhere I got to be. So, anyway, Mavs get a shooter. They kind of needed to not or add another shooter to their team. And Nicolo Melli can be an interesting, like, kind of power forward shooter type. And all they did was, it's like, yeah, they lose Johnson and his defense, but and only gave up a second-round pick as well. That's pretty good. And then the last deal to get to was a 3-teamer. The Sixers have gotten George Hill and Ignas Brazidelikis. He was a second-round pick a couple years back. But the Sixers get George Hill. The Thunder get Tony Bradley, Austin Rivers, and 2025 and 2026 second-round picks. And the Knicks get Terrence Ferguson. So the Thunder managed to get Terrence Ferguson. They traded him to the Sixers and then managed to pull a trade with the Sixers that traded Terrence Ferguson to the Knicks. Has a team ever traded the same guy twice in the same year? Because that's funny. The Sixers needed another kind of like guard type who could run an offense. Hill can do that, provide good defense, and knock down outside shots. They needed all of those things. They weren't really using Bradley, so they sent him to the Thunder. You know, young big man, young center. Austin Rivers is a nice veteran player. Kind of surprised the Knicks traded him, to be honest. Although they get a young, athletic wing with some upside. He's like but probably like a rotation wing type in Terrence Ferguson, but he fits the Knicks timetable. And he's been like an okay rotation player. I think that's a good deal. I'm gonna refresh this one more time, see if anything else, if they put anything else as part of this. Nope. So with that being said, that is the NBA trade deadline. As I said, Aaron Gordon is now in Denver, and they didn't give up anything, or they only gave up Gary Harris, R.J. Hampton, and a first to get him. A first 4 years from now to get him. Oladipo's in Miami, and they gave up Kelly Olynyk and nothing else of value to get him. That's pretty wild. And Nikola Vucevic got 2 first-round picks in Wendell Carter and a nice, juicy, big expiring contract in Otto Porter from Chicago for Orlando. So, deadline day did not disappoint this year. With that being said, I have been Blind Eye for Blind Eye Live. Oh, I've got one last question. I will answer this. Do you think Kelly Oubre and Eric Paschall, Minnesota's 2021 first-round pick for Zach LaVine, could have been possible trade before the Vucevic trade? Oubre, Paschall, and the Minnesota 2021 for Zach? Nah. Look, I like Zach LaVine. That Minnesota pick is worth more than Zach LaVine. In that. Or just, maybe you do that for Zach LaVine alone. But in this draft, heck no. In this draft, there are guys, picks 4 through 7, who I think could develop into better players than Zach LaVine. Who Zach LaVine is right now. Just period. I don't know. It's like, and plus the other stuff, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't have done it. And I don't know if Chicago would have done it, to be honest. Because Zach LaVine has been so good. So there's kind of like, that's interesting. So thanks once again for popping back in, William, with the thing, or with your question. Sorry I didn't see it earlier because I was going through trades. I had ESPN up in front of me. But I'm wrapping up the show today. Thanks for tuning in. If you missed anything, please check out the archive on the channel here at Blind Eye Media. Please, if you like the stream, hit the like button. It really does help the channel. Sub and hit notify all if you want to be, or make sure you get notifications for when I go live. That would be really appreciated. And tell your friends. You don't have to share it on social media. Just, tell a friend who's into sports. Because, if everybody told a friend and that friend tunes in, that helps me out. So, appreciate you guys. Hope y'all have a blessed day or a blessed evening. And I will catch y'all tomorrow, hopefully at 2, although things could get crazy tomorrow. My sister's getting married Saturday. I'm hoping to go live tomorrow. If I don't, it's because wedding stuff went crazy. So, but I will be back for sure Monday. So, I know this wasn't my usual time, but I'm going to try to be 2 o'clock Central Time from here on out. So, with that